Hello, and welcome back to another episode of 7 Minutes in Heaven, a podcast devotional for educators. I am your host, Pratiá Jordan, blogger-in-chief of Prayer and Pedagogy.com, where our mission is to edify, equip, and encourage educators everywhere. This is episode 9, day 22. Let's get into it. Today's word comes from Daniel chapter 10, verses 12 through 14. This is the New King James Version. And it reads, "Then he said to me, 'Do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. And behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the king of Persia. Now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision refers to many days yet to come.'" So, for a little bit of background story, this is Daniel of the Lion's Den, that you might be familiar with, and he is having yet another kind of strange spiritual encounter. He's had plenty of these in his lifetime, more than probably your average person. And so at this point in time, Daniel 10 starts off in verses 1 and 2 telling us that Daniel is mourning and fasting. He has, it says specifically, given up choice foods and drink and meat for a period of time. And this is where a lot of people get the Daniel fast from, where we do a 21-day fast, and typically it is only vegetables, grains, things that come from the earth, no food, no dairy products, things of that nature. And at the beginning, when Daniel is reflecting, or when this story is being told back, he talks about how this fast lasted for 21 days. Here in verses 12 through 14, we get a little bit more insight into what is taking place. But Daniel is in a time period where he's seeking clarity. He is mourning, and we don't know exactly what he's mourning about. But we can allude to some of the visions and challenges that he's experienced and that he's been told about that kind of have him set unease. He is concerned about the future, concerned about what he thinks God has told him, or what God has told him about things that are going to come forth to him and to his people. And so he's in this period of seeking God, of setting himself before God and needing to hear from God to have more vision, more clarity on the vision. And I think that that rings true for a lot of educators right now, where we're looking at the state of education, we're looking at the state of our lives in education. And for some people, there may be this need for clarity, that we're kind of unsure of what's happening in the future. What are my next steps? What am I going to be doing? Am I going to stay in the classroom? Am I going to take another position? Am I going to leave the field altogether? And a lot of believers are seeking clarity. And oftentimes at the beginning of the year, we use this time for fasting, for praying, and for seeking God about the upcoming year. And so we turn to Daniel quite often. But as I was looking at Daniel, there were a couple of things that stood out to me that may help us look at how we seek God throughout this season when we desire clarity and understanding for vision. Number one, we need to set our hearts. Verse 12 says, "From the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God." And I think that when we have determined that we are going to spend some time fasting, praying, seeking God, that comes from a place of humility. It's hard, at least for me, it's hard to admit that I do not have control over my life. It's a challenge, okay? My therapist and I, we talk about this almost every other month. But it's so hard to really come to grips with the fact that I do not control my life, and I have very little control over the things that I think I have control over. And it is so freeing to know that in my relationship with God, I can come to Him. I can set my heart to understand that I am not in control, to be humble enough to realize that even though I make choices and I have decisions and I do actions on a daily basis, that ultimately the flow and the ebb of my life is in his hands. And when I come to him with that humility, with that honesty, and talk about even how challenging it is, I know that God is hearing me. And I know that I need to put myself in a position where I can set my heart to truly be open to whatever it is that he is going to say, whatever instructions he's going to lay out, whatever direction he's going to give, that I have to surrender and say, I am submitting myself to you. I am giving up what control I think I have, and whatever you lay out for me is what I'm going to do. And so the first thing that we need to be able to do in this season of seeking clarity, of seeking vision, of getting understanding, is to set our hearts and to get our hearts and our minds in the right place so that we can hear from God, whatever it is that he has to say. Number 2, we need to set our mouths. In the latter part of verse 12, it says, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. There is so much power in prayer. It cannot be underestimated how powerful prayer is. That's why the motto and the mantra around here is pray, teach, repeat. And it's specifically in that order because everything starts with prayer. Everything starts with communion and communication with God. And here it says that when Daniel was fasting, he was also praying. And so it's so critical that when we do take time to sacrifice and to deny ourselves and deny our flesh, that we're not just going on a diet, that we're not just denying ourselves sugar and sweets and candy or soda or meat and things of that nature, but nothing else changes. It's that we are using our mouths to lift up ourselves, to lift up our community, to lift up our students, our peers, our districts, our administrators, and lift them up in prayer, that we are vocal, that we are heard praying in the presence of God, because our words have impact. It says here that as he's having this encounter with this spiritual being, it's saying, I've come because of your words. It's a direct cause and effect. It didn't say I came because you didn't eat sugar. It didn't say I came because you gave up meat. It didn't say I came because you went to church every single day during that time period. It says I came because of your words. We cannot, absolutely cannot overlook the power of prayer. And so once we have set our hearts and set our minds to come and seek understanding, to be humble in the presence of God, we then need to set our mouths to pray. And we have to be specific and strategic and consistent in our prayer life so that we can actually see the results that we are seeking. Lastly, don't set your clock. This part, when I first understood it and had it revealed to me, it kind of threw me for a loop because I'm very used to doing a 21-day fast, 7-day fast, 3-day fast. But here in Daniel, in verse 2 and 3, it talks about how he fasted for 21 days. And so oftentimes we start off by doing a 21-day fast. But later in verse 13, and verse 12 and 13, the spiritual being is responding and saying, for from the first day that you set your heart, that you humbled yourself, that you started praying, I came. But in verse 13, it says, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. And so when it talks about Daniel and he's saying, I fasted for 21 days, it doesn't seem to indicate that he set out to fast for 21 days. It's that he got his response on day 21. That because there was this spiritual warfare happening, his answer was coming. It was on the way from the first day, but it took 21 days for his answer to arrive because of the spiritual warfare, because of the battle that was taking place in a realm that he could not see. But his actions, the fasting, the praying, the surrender, the submission, the sacrifice, helped to spur on this spiritual warfare that was taking place. And ultimately, he got his answer on day 21. And so the reason why I say don't set your clock is because what if your answer comes on day 3? Do you still need to fast and pray for the next umpteenth amount of days when you've already gotten your answer? Or what if your answer doesn't come on day 21? What if the clarity and the understanding and the vision that you are seeking God for doesn't show up until day 22? What if it doesn't show up until day 30? What if it doesn't show up till day 365? I'm saying don't set your clock because I want you to be focused and fasted on getting the response and the answer that you're seeking from God, not on a specific set of time. Allow God to move as he moves. This goes back to setting your heart to be humble, to know that you have no control and that God is going to move. The thing that you can control is the fasting, the praying, the seeking, the submitting, the sacrificing. And when you get your answer, the praise and rejoice that will come in response. So here is your hashtag 7-minute challenge for the week. First, think about what clarity are you seeking from God? Write it down, record a voice note, stick it somewhere where you can come back to it. And then seek God until you get your response. Don't set a clock. Set your heart, set your mind, set your mouth on God and see how he will work. Have a friend hold you accountable, and if you need some help, just use the hashtag 7-minute challenge to tag me in. This has been episode 9, day 22. Thank you for joining me at the intersection of prayer and pedagogy. See you next time.